Donc, merci à tous les intervenants. On a vu qu'à travers le constat, ils ont déjà pointé le doigt sur un certain nombre de possibilités et de propositions, dont certaines sont illustrées, incarnées au sein des écoles Espérance Banlieue. Donc c'est une habile transition vers la table ronde numéro 3, sachant qu'il y aura une table ronde numéro 2 qui est, on va faire un focus sur ce qui se passe en Europe et notamment en Angleterre. Merci d'applaudir les intervenants de la table ronde numéro 2. Les échanges seront en anglais avec quelques traductions synthétiques pour permettre à ceux qui ne saisissent pas les conversations, la totalité, la plénitude des conversations, d'en saisir la substance.
Oui, bonjour, donc j'enchaîne tout de suite pour ne pas perdre du temps. Donc merci beaucoup pour cette invitation. Je m'appelle Peter Gamble, je suis journaliste et écrivain. Vous avez sûrement lu tous mes bouquins. Et si ce n'est pas le cas, allez-y, il y a des librairies pas très loin. Alors, je vais vous choquer un peu parce que on est dans un débat qui est parfois très franco-français, franchouillard. Et effectivement, il y a des zones sensibles éducatives ailleurs, même partout. Parce que si vous regardez les chiffres, vous allez voir, donc un peu partout dans le monde, il y a une corrélation entre background socio-économique et performance scolaire. Il y a aussi des problèmes un peu partout. Donc pour discuter un peu ce qui se fait et ce qui se passe dans d'autres pays, nous avons deux intervenants de très grande qualité. D'abord, à ma gauche, Andreas Schleicher. Vous connaissez tous les programmes PISA de l'OCDE. C'est lui, Monsieur PISA. Il a inventé tout ça. Il est à l'OCDE depuis une quinzaine d'années. Et c'est surtout lui qui est responsable pour tous les mots qui tombent de PISA sur la France. Deuxième intervenant, c'est David Laws. Bon, vous connaissez peut-être pas David Laws, si vous êtes anglais, vous le connaissez très très bien, parce que c'est un homme politique qui vient d'écrire effectivement son bouquin sur la politique anglaise, qui a fait du bruit il y a quelques semaines. Mais depuis un an, il travaille beaucoup avec donc une association en Angleterre qui s'occupe effectivement des écoles dans les zones sensibles avec une réussite remarquable. Donc c'est aussi l'ex-secrétaire d'État pour l'éducation en Angleterre, donc c'est vraiment quelqu'un de grande qualité. Alors, comme M. Mestrallet a dit, nous avons le deuxième choc, c'est-à-dire nous allons parler en anglais. Mais je vais poser les questions en français pour que vous puissiez comprendre. Et après, ils vont répondre en anglais. Et peut-être il y a une traductrice au milieu qui va vous aider à répondre. Et pour les questions à la fin, si vous voulez poser des questions en français, on peut vous aider avec ça. Donc, je vais d'abord commencer avec Andreas Schleicher pour poser la question. Alors, ailleurs, comment ça se passe? Est-ce que c'est une fatalité d'être issu d'une famille d'immigrés et d'être pauvre dans un autre pays et pas réussir sa scolarité?
Merci, and thanks for inviting me. This is obviously a topic that every country is debating. And if I can get my slides, I don't know. Yeah, I just wanted to show you how much the success of countries in addressing the most disadvantaged students actually varies. This is the first observation that we have. On the vertical axis, you see countries ordered by the results on the PISA test. But for our discussion, more important is the horizontal axis, where you can see the impact which social background makes on student performance. If you click once more. Yeah.
Alors.
Merci beaucoup du coup. Je vous remercie d'être ici. L'immigration, c'est un sujet important pour tous les pays. Ce diagramme vous explique. Donc, à l'horizontale, ce sont les résultats des enquêtes PISA. Et à l'horizontale, c'est l'impact du contexte social.
Now, a very favorite sort of policy response to this is just to put more money into systems. And actually, you see that here. The money that is spent per student doesn't explain very much in terms of the success of education to address inequalities and assist students with difficulties. If you click once more, Luxembourg, for example, the most expensive system, isn't doing very well on quality and equity. The next question, of course, is...
Une des politiques pour combattre les inégalités, c'est de mettre beaucoup d'argent dans le système éducatif. Mais par exemple, le Mexico n'est pas... Pardon, Luxembourg.
The next question is, can you actually change those dynamics? That is, in a reasonable amount of time, say 10 years, can you close the gap? Can you give students from difficult backgrounds, students with an immigrant background, a better future? And you can see that on the slide. I don't know whether colleagues can move the points here, but when you look, for example, Chile, keep clicking, Chile and Turkey were both at a very low point, but you could see actually Chile moving up, but you look at Turkey, click once more, and you can see actually in the course of 10 years, Turkey was able to raise performance and close a big part of the social gap. At the high end of the performance spectrum, you can see Singapore and Shanghai, they keep moving forward. That's not a surprise. But I want to show you Germany. Actually, 10 years ago, Germany was about where France was in terms of the difficulties of disadvantaged students. Today, a big share of that gap has been closed. And you can see other countries as well.
Alors, en substance, M. Schacher nous montrait que l'Allemagne était dans la même situation que la France il y a une dizaine d'années et qu'elle a réussi à réduire le gap. Il allait nous expliquer comment. Voilà.
On that topic, on this chart, you can see the performance distribution in Mexico by social background. You know, the red dots are the 10% of the most disadvantaged children in Mexico, and the green dots are the 10% from the wealthiest background. And you can see there is a performance gap, but if you compare that with Chile, for example, you can see how children from similar backgrounds perform very differently depending on where they go to school. And if you do that across countries, you can see how much the success of the most disadvantaged students varies across countries.
Voilà, le graphique montre que le taux de réussite des élèves défavorisés selon le pays varie de manière considérable. Voilà.
You can see, for example, if you are among the lowest in terms of social background in France, you do as badly as the lowest in Mexico.
Les plus mauvais élèves en France sont au même niveau que les plus mauvais élèves au Mexique.
So going to a school in the banlieue in France, you know, you could as well go to the school in the banlieue of Mexico. If you come from a privileged background, you're doing well. But I want to show you the last bar, and that is Shanghai in China. 10% of the most disadvantaged children in Shanghai. And they often live actually without any proper housing. Their parents work on construction sites. They have very, very difficult living conditions. And yet, those children go to schools where they are educated so well that they can actually compete with many of the wealthiest children in Europe.
Le dernier exemple pris était la Chine, où les élèves les plus pauvres sont au même niveau que les élèves les plus privilégiés en termes de résultats scolaires. Donc c'était l'exemple opposé au Mexique.
The children with an immigrant background are a good example. If you see, for example, here, the children who come from an immigrant background in France typically have the most difficult experience, not only academically, but on this chart I show you an indicator of social integration.
Voilà, alors le graphique, c'est le même graphique que précédemment. Il montre le taux d'intégration, si on peut dire. Ce serait intéressant de demander quel KPI a été utilisé, des enfants issus de l'immigration, deuxième génération. Et la France, évidemment, est le plus mauvais.
Let's talk about some of the policy responses. What does Shanghai and China, for example, do? They're not necessarily spending more money on disadvantaged students in schools. They do that a little bit, but they're very good in attracting the most talented teachers to the most challenging classrooms. And they're very good in attracting the best principals to the toughest schools. I explain how.
La façon dont les Chinois, en l'occurrence, font, ce n'est pas de donner plus de moyens à ces écoles ou ces élèves défavorisés, c'est de s'assurer qu'ils bénéficient des meilleurs professeurs et des meilleurs directeurs d'école. Voilà.
If you, for example, vice principal in a high-performing school, you know, one of these elite schools in Shanghai, and one day you ask yourself, I would really like to become a principal. The government will tell you, well, that's a great ambition, but you know, first help us to turn around one of the lowest performing schools. And we're going to take one of your teachers with you, and we're going to pair you with a high-performing school so that you do not lose those resources, but the capacity of the system to attract talent where it is most urgently needed is very, very strong.
Le gouvernement chinois incite les proviseurs des écoles favorisées à d'abord s'orienter vers des écoles plus difficiles pour les retourner, les turnaround, les redresser, plutôt que de les envoyer dans des écoles privilégiées d'où ils viennent. Voilà.
And it's been a history of 6 years of introducing those policies that have fundamentally changed the educational landscape, that have closed about half of the performance variation that we saw in schools in the country. Give you one more example. My own country, Germany, in year 2000 came out very badly on the PISA results. Not in terms of average performance, but in terms of the performance of the most disadvantaged students, the students in the banlieues, the students with an immigrant background. But within 10 years, it has made also remarkable success. And the focus there has very much been on identifying failure early on, and rather than in the past, letting students repeat the year when they were not successful, which is very convenient for schools. You just pass the problem on to the next teacher in the next school. Schools suddenly had to solve those problems. They were given additional resources, additional capacity to actually help struggling students to succeed better. And this has had a remarkable impact in terms of also narrowing the performance disadvantage, as you could see on the chart.
L'année 2011 a été très mauvaise pour l'Allemagne concernant les résultats. Pardon ?
2000.
À 2000, pardon, 2000, oui, parce qu'après elle a dit 10 ans, oui, donc 2000. Les deux solutions qui ont été adoptées, ça a été d'encourager le redoublement d'une part et de dédier plus de ressources, non seulement aux élèves en difficulté.
C'était pas un redoublement, c'est exactement le contraire. Pardon. Non,
Alors, je suis désolée.
C'était de mettre l'accent sur les élèves qui étaient vraiment en difficulté, de focaliser tous les efforts sur eux. Et en 10 ans, ils ont fait une montée très impressionnante à cause de ça. Donc, ils ont vraiment focalisé sur... Ils n'ont pas effectivement fait redoublement. C'est la façon facile de se débarrasser du problème. C'est ça ce qu'il dit.
D'accord.
Okay.
Excusez-moi.
Bon. Donc, merci Andrés. Donc, il n'y a pas de fatalité. Donc, si vous êtes en Allemagne, si vous êtes en Turquie, si vous êtes en Chine, en Angleterre, donc, David a des expériences à raconter. Et donc, il fait, comme je disais, partie d'une association de réseau qui s'appelle ARC. Et j'ai demandé à David au début de bien expliquer ce que c'est et comment ça fonctionne et si ça fonctionne. David, if you could pick up about ARC, what it is, how it works, does it work?
Great. It's a great pleasure to be here today to talk a little bit about our experience in England. And I'm not going to try to persuade you that we've got everything right there, including the teaching of modern foreign languages, as you can see from the fact that I need a translator today. One of the roles that I'm now in is working for a group, as Peter has explained, which is called ARC, and which is one of the biggest academy chains in England, running 34 schools in London and some of the other cities.
Aujourd'hui, il a un rôle important, il s'occupe du groupe ARC, qui est une chaîne d'écoles indépendantes où il y a 34 écoles actuellement.
And ARC is an academy chain, which was something that didn't exist in England before the year 2000 and before the government of Tony Blair. And I should say that I'm not from his political party, so I'm not here to advocate for him. But in the year 2000, there really were only two types of schools in England. There were either the private schools, which were fee-paying, which are expensive, which are really there for rich parents. And then there were the state-run schools, which were run by the local government, by the municipalities. And many of these municipal schools, particularly in poor areas, were very bad in their performance, and 80 or 90% of the students used to fail after 11 or 12 years of education.
Ces écoles, donc ARC, n'existaient pas avant les années 2000, donc avant les années du gouvernement de Tony Blair. Avant les années 2000, il n'y avait que deux types d'écoles, donc les écoles privées qui étaient très coûteuses et donc pour des parents qui avaient les moyens, et il y avait les écoles donc publiques, mais qui avaient de très mauvais résultats, et 80 à 90% des enfants de ces écoles décrochaient du système.
And the problem was that these schools had been failing for years and years. And all of the mechanisms that were supposed to turn around the schools when they were weak were failing. The local authorities were usually controlled by the same political party for long, long periods of time. And quite often the local political party would say, what can you expect about children like this? They're very poor, they come from disadvantaged backgrounds. Unless you solve poverty, you're always going to get bad performance. The governing bodies and the leadership were often quite weak, and they also were inclined to blame poverty for low educational performance. We have a lot of accountability and a very strong schools inspectorate in England, so we knew that these were really bad schools, and yet nothing was happening about them. And what changed was in the year 2000, Tony Blair, the Prime Minister, said, we can't continue like this. We as a left-wing party want to see children from poor backgrounds have a real chance. And he did something very controversial, which was invited private groups, charitable groups, not-for-profit groups with no ability to make money, to come into the state education system, to be paid by the government to run some of those failing schools and to take those schools over, with no admission fees, with no ability to profit, with no ability to pick the children from the most advantaged families to see whether those schools could be improved. And it was a very controversial thing to do at the time, and it was controversial for a number of years afterwards.
Donc, après les années, ces écoles ont commencé dans les écoles donc, privées et publiques, ça ne marchait pas bien. Les systèmes pour les redresser, ça ne fonctionnait pas non plus. Voilà, on a commencé à accuser, c'était la pauvreté qui rendait ces résultats dans l'éducation, les résultats pour l'éducation. Mais ça a commencé à changer en 2000, où Tony Blair, donc du parti de gauche, a dit qu'il fallait qu'on donne de vraies chances à ces enfants. Donc il a demandé à des organisations caritatives donc, qui n'étaient pas là pour gagner de l'argent, de redresser ces écoles et de les reprendre.
So what happened in England were forced by the government, by central government, to be taken away from the municipalities, and they were turned into these academies. And groups which didn't exist before the year 2000, often charities, people who are very passionate about improving the state of education in their communities, often a lot of people from the City of London who'd made money in a very wealthy part of our economy and who wanted to give something back to society, came forward to take over these schools. And the only schools they were given were the worst schools in the country, many of which were about to be closed down, and many of which were only half full because parents really didn't want their children to have to go there unless there were no other schools available. And those academies gradually turned around the quality of education in the schools. Some did it very, very quickly, and some took a longer period of time. Most of them were achieved by closing the existing school and reopening it with new leadership and new governance. Some of them were completely new schools, which we in England call free schools. And I suppose that there were 3 or 4 things that were done in those schools to try to improve their performance. Firstly, they almost always needed new leadership and governance. The previous leadership and governance was usually bad and accepted failure. Second thing, they needed incredibly high aspirations and discipline. They needed people who really believed that those children might be poor and their parents might be disadvantaged, but actually there was nothing inevitable about them doing badly in education, and a very strong moral purpose that children can succeed from whatever background. Thirdly, there was quite a lot of focus on doing basic things well. Many of the previous schools had bad discipline, bad attendance, no connection between the parents and the school, and often not strong on the basics of English and maths. And all of those things there was a big focus on. And I suppose finally, there was more freedom and flexibility given to some of those schools on the curriculum and on the length of the school day. Many of those schools serving poor areas opened for longer so that they could teach children for longer. Sorry, that was quite a long...
Donc ces écoles autonomes, donc c'est soit elles ont été reprises d'écoles, c'est des écoles qui existaient déjà et donc qui ont été reprises, soit ce sont des écoles qui ont été créées du départ. Donc il y avait plusieurs raisons que ces écoles qui marchaient pas, donc il y avait besoin d'un nouveau leadership parce que c'était l'ancien acceptait des échecs et les décrochages. Il y avait aussi besoin de discipline, que peu importe que ces enfants viennent de contextes défavorisés, ils pouvaient quand même réussir. Il y avait aussi d'importants intérêt pour la base, donc ils voulaient remettre les matières de base pour bien se concentrer sur ces matières-là. Il n'y avait également pas de connexion entre les parents et le corps enseignant. Et dans ces écoles, donc dans ces nouvelles écoles qui ont été créées, les journées sont plus longues. Voilà, les journées sont plus longues et il y avait...
Et aussi plus de flexibilité avec le programme. Donc c'est ça aussi qui est important.
Can I say one final? I won't speak for too long on this because I could be here for hours. But I think that the final point that I need to make is this. This was a very controversial thing to do, and many people thought that it might not work, or it would only work by selecting families from richer backgrounds, and there were lots of fears about whether the schools would try to make profit or whether it was privatization. But of course, all of these schools were state-funded, open to everybody, on the same basis as their predecessor schools. And eventually, it was possible to measure the quality of their performance by comparing those schools at an academic standard of rigor, not a political standard, if I can say that as a former politician, to really measure how they were performing versus truly similar schools. And the academic evidence showed that they were doing a very, very good job. Many of them have now become some of the highest performing state schools in the whole of England, which is an amazing achievement when they still serve very, very poor catchments, often 50, 60, 70% of poor children. And what that has helped us to do in England is to turn London, because most of these schools were in London, from one of the worst education areas in England to the best performing, particularly in terms of value added. Now, there are no magic wands in education. And there's a risk, of course, in politics that people take bits of evidence and try to turn it into something beyond what has actually been achieved. But it has been a very important experience in England, and particularly it's shown that the relationship between poverty and educational performance is not an inevitable one, and that with the right quality of teaching and leadership, you can actually deliver very good results, even for very poor children.
Ah, donc, il y avait des points très controversés au début. Est-ce qu'il fallait qu'on sélectionne les familles pour ces écoles? Est-ce que c'était pour faire du profit? Est-ce qu'il fallait privatiser ces écoles? Mais non, ce sont des écoles qui sont ouvertes pour tout le monde, qui sont soutenues par le gouvernement. Et ces écoles ont fait de très belles performances. Il y en a certaines qui sont devenues parmi les meilleures écoles en Angleterre. À Londres, c'était avant une zone où avec les performances éducatives n'étaient pas très bonnes, et il y a eu d'excellents résultats. Mais ce n'est pas un coup de baguette magique. Voilà, ça a pris de nombreuses années et des efforts. Voilà, c'était une expérience en Angleterre, et pour montrer que la pauvreté et l'éducation, ce n'est pas incompatible.
Donc je vais demander à nos deux intervenants de nous dire un peu plus sur les éléments clés du changement. Alors, les deux ont parlé des enseignants et leadership. I wanted to ask you both, what if you had to reduce the really crucial elements down to a small number? You've talked about teachers, you talked about leadership. Is that really all it is, or what does it have to be more complicated than that?
Leadership is a big part of the equation anywhere. But the more discretion you have, the more capacity you have at the front line, the stronger your overall system also needs to be. Local autonomy, for example, Sweden would be a counterexample, where actually devolving responsibilities to schools hasn't led to improvement. I think the example of England is interesting because on the one hand, schools have high amount of discretion, but there's also robust authority that inspects schools and guides schools and actually helps underperforming schools to find out that they're not doing well and help them improve. And I think it's both components together. On the one hand, giving schools the room to maneuver, and at the same time having a very strong, robust system, a high set of standards to help the system be aligned. And it's very hard to compare those things also across countries. Public school in Finland or China would have a lot more discretion than a private school in France. So I think comparing those things across countries is very difficult.
Donc les deux facteurs clés de succès identifiés par M. Schleicher, c'est d'une part l'autonomie dédiée aux écoles, combinée avec une robustesse plus générale du système. Il donne l'exemple de la Suède, pour qui la décentralisation n'a pas bien fonctionné. Voilà.
Oui. Mais donc, il disait aussi qu'il y a en Chine et en Finlande, donc on a plus de flexibilité que dans une école privée en France, avec le programme, avec l'organisation des horaires, etc. David, what would you say?
Yes, I mean, I will agree with Andreas that the two really important factors are the quality of leadership and teaching, but with the autonomy for good leaders has to go the accountability. And we have in England one of the toughest accountability systems in the world, which I have to say isn't always popular with head teachers and teachers. We have a very tough inspection system run by Ofsted, the school inspector. We have lots of targets, and we have lots of measurements, and we have lots of league tables. And eventually, the policy of the government in England became that any school in the country that received the lowest grade in its Ofsted inspection was automatically turned into an academy. In other words, automatically the government from the centre found one of these charitable sponsors and put that body in charge of the school, even where the governing body didn't want to do that. So there is a tough accountability system, and that is linked with improving leadership and teaching quality. Now, I should also say, Okay, sorry.
Donc, il est d'accord avec ce qui a été dit avant, que la qualité du leadership et donc de l'enseignement était très important, et l'autonomie de ce leadership est également important. Par rapport à ces écoles où ça ne fonctionnait pas, elles ont été obligées d'être retirées de l'État pour être données à des organisations caritatives, et pour là qu'on a voulu renforcer le leadership de ces écoles.
Alors, le point majeur, c'est quand même ce qu'on appelle en anglais accountability, qui est très difficile à traduire en français, qui est un peu la responsabilisation du système. Donc il y a toute des grilles d'évaluation de toutes les écoles, et si jamais la performance de l'école est mauvaise, là du coup automatiquement en Angleterre depuis quelques années, on donne l'école publique à une association comme les associations de David, qui sont caritatives, parce que on dit c'est un échec, donc ça marche pas, donc il faut essayer autre chose.
Two final points. Firstly, this point about the focus on underperforming schools, which are often in the poor areas, which I guess it will be the same in your country on average. The focus of this means of intervention and the tough accountability over the last 10 years has meant that the most improved schools across the whole of England have been the ones with the highest level of disadvantage. And the more disadvantaged the school, the bigger gain will have been made over the last 10 years. In other words, there's been a very strong focus, whether they're academies or state-run schools, on the most disadvantaged schools. And the last point is that the key for us now in England, the big debate that we're having at the moment in this period of government, is how to spread this very strong leadership and teaching quality to those parts of the country where it is still difficult to get good leaders and good teachers to go. And I'm not pretending that we have solved that debate in England at all. It's a very live issue.
Donc, 2 points pour finir. Il y a eu un focus important. On a se concentré sur les écoles qui avaient des difficultés dans des régions difficiles. Mais les écoles où il y avait le plus grand nombre d'élèves en difficulté, celles qui ont fait le plus de progrès. Il y a également un débat important aujourd'hui en Angleterre, c'est comment extendre ce leadership, et voilà, c'est ce qu'ils essayent aujourd'hui, mais ils n'ont pas la prétention d'avoir résolu ce débat.
Just one angle, administrative accountability is a very important part of the picture. But I'd also like to add the aspect of professional accountability. One of the things that struck me most, when I visited Shanghai recently, is that as a teacher, every week you will observe some other teachers' classrooms. Every month you participate in a teacher competition. You are constantly embedded in collaborating with other teachers. Teachers in Shanghai have a platform, a digital platform, where they can upload their own lesson plans. But the trick of this is, the more other teachers download your lessons, use your lessons, criticize your lessons, improve your lessons, the more popular you become in the system. There's a systematic use of reputational metrics that assess the status of teachers. And at the end of the school year, your principal will not only ask you, did you teach your students well? They will also ask you, what impact did you make for the education system as a whole? And that's basically the combination of professional discretion and a collaborative culture that is very important.
Donc l'accountability, qui est en effet difficile à traduire, la responsabilisation administrative dont on a parlé avec David est un point important. Monsieur Schleicher insiste aussi sur la responsabilité entre collègues, entre professeurs de type plus professionnel. Il donne l'exemple de la Chine où chaque mois les professeurs se rendent dans les classes d'autres profs pour réagir, évaluer, donner leur avis sur les cours qui sont donnés. Et il a terminé en disant que le partage des meilleures pratiques, que le fait que vos cours soient populaires rentre dans votre évaluation, rentre dans l'évaluation des professeurs en fin d'année. Voilà.
Effectivement, il y a donc le système où on télécharge ces cours sur une plateforme digitale et les autres enseignants partout dans le pays peuvent consulter, ajouter, commenter. Et plus que vous êtes populaire, plus que c'est bon pour votre évaluation perso. Donc il y a tout un système, un réseau numérique pour aider votre évaluation. Bon, je crois que malheureusement, on arrive à la fin. En tout cas, merci beaucoup à David Laws, André Schleicher pour ce débat passionnant.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. Merci, Monsieur Schleicher. Merci, Peter. Merci aux traducteurs.